Why is AM sunlight so important? Why should you reconsider that vitamin D3 supplement and those sunglasses? Let's talk about that and more in this episode. Welcome back, my friends. My name is Sarah. I am known as Carnivore Yogi. Thank you so much for being here and clicking on today's video. Today I have a very special guest, Dr. Ghazvini. Now, he studied with Dr. Jack Kruse, and last week's episode with Dr. Jack Kruse started a lot of conversation with my listeners, with my private group, with a lot of you guys. And so Dr. Corey has studied extensively with Dr. Kruse, and I wanted to bring him on to expand on a lot of those topics. So today in this YouTube episode, I'm going to show you the snippets where we talk about inflammation, dopamine, why you want to reconsider wearing sunglasses, why you probably don't want to take a vitamin D3 supplement, and how to use a Sperti vitamin D lamp. It's not just as easy as plug and play. So we go into a lot of these intricacies. There's actually a full episode. I'm going to put the podcast in the information section below for you guys if you want to listen to the full conversation. And I'm open to also posting that here on YouTube if that is something you guys are interested in. Please, again, leave me a comment below this video if you are just completely opposed to podcasts, which, by the way, I will be posting the full episode of Elliot Overton this weekend on Saturday for those of you who have asked. So that is coming. But as I mentioned, the interview with Dr. Jack Kruse definitely stirred up a lot of questions. And so it's been really wonderful to get to know Dr. Corey, to talk with him here. And I'm excited to share this interview with you guys. Today's episode is sponsored by Upgraded Formulas. Now, you guys know I don't like to take a lot of supplements without actually testing to see if I need them. And the Upgraded Formulas hair tissue mineral analysis with a consultation actually shows you how your magnesium, calcium, potassium, sodium, as well as how your heavy metals are actually manifesting in your body using your very own hair, which is different than a blood test. A blood test tells you a snapshot in time. So one of the things I see people struggling with just in general is their mineral balance. You could be on a diet with carbohydrates, or you could be on a low carb keto or carnivore diet, and a lot of issues that people are having are actually mineral imbalance. So one of the most targeted ways to figure out what you actually need, since our soil is extremely depleted, we cannot get a lot of these minerals and nutrients from food, unfortunately, is to go ahead and do that hair tissue mineral analysis to see where you actually stand, to test and not guess. You can use my code YOGI and save 10% off of the analysis, as well as a consultation and any of the supplements there on the Upgraded Formulas website. So please do check them out. Thank you, Upgraded Formulas, for sponsoring today's episode. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Make sure to leave me some comments, some feedback below. If you have more questions, maybe I can get Dr. Corey back on and talk some more about these topics. All right, guys, enjoy.
With mitochondrial biology, because these sciences are revealing to us that if we make these simple changes, that we can do everything on our own that we need to do to maintain optimal health, you know? And the medical paradigm doesn't want us to believe that. They don't want us to understand that, because that destroys their modus operandi, which is to, steal all of our money and keep us sick and doing, whatever therapies that they have. I mean, taking lists of drugs and going and doing all types of modalities that totally divorce us from the way that nature designed us to operate. So people need to start to learn about mitochondria, and they need to start to learn about circadian rhythm, because that is the more fundamental process of how the body actually works, And a lot of natural practitioners that I'm associated with in the alternative medicine community want to tell each other that, maybe you need to do some detox, or you need to take these certain herbs that are going to help purge the toxins out of your body. Well, the truth is, we already have developed through evolution a ton of different ways to detoxify appropriately.
Yeah.
We have within us the ability to get rid of environmental pollutants, yet we're not allowing our body the proper scheduling and our brain to be able to know when and what time processes are supposed to happen. And that's throwing a wrench in the entire circadian cycle and not allowing those programs to function appropriately. See? Because if you can't recycle your bad cells, the bad mitochondria and the bad cells actually are going to continue to replicate themselves, and you're never going to get better no matter how much food that you eat, and how much food that you don't eat, or what you're actually eating. That's why it's really important for everyone to understand that it's all about mitochondrial biology, and not the genes like we were talking about earlier, because you can do whatever genetic testing you want to do to find whatever mutations that you actually have, SNPs and SNAPs. And you can see what predisposition that you have to a disease, but we know because of the work that Doug Wallace has done on mitochondria that, and then that's a PhD researcher.
I just listened to a bunch of his stuff on YouTube. It was fabulous.
Really advanced science.
Yeah.
But it's by far the most important information that you'll come across today.
Yep.
We know that if you have a cell that is diseased and you take that cell's mitochondria out and replace it with good functioning mitochondria, that the cell can repair itself and begin to get better, regardless of what the genetic phenotype is. So what does that mean? That means that the health and the vitality of a cell is completely corresponding to the amount of energy that the mitochondria within the cell can make, right? Because it's the amount of energy that the cell has which dictates the genetic phenotype that's there present in the genes in the nucleus, right? And that's why the modern scientific paradigm has really led us in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Because they want to focus in on genes, and then if you don't understand mitochondria, if you don't know about the work of Doug Wallace, then you would start to believe a farcity.
Yeah.
And that can lead to a big problem because you focus in on all the genetic mutations that you may have, if you go and do a 23andMe test. But if you're not paying attention to mitochondria, you'll never figure out how to turn those genes on or off, because that's exactly how good or bad genes are activated by the amount of energy that's within the cell from the mitochondria. See?
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
if someone has a specific disease, like let's say, for example, liver problems, or let's say, like if someone is suffering from ailments like migraines, or if someone has fatigue. These are just really simple situations that most people can relate to. You're not having a disease that is a result of the genes themselves. It's actually the mitochondrial issue that's presenting itself based on the genetic phenotype that you have. And we know this definitively because of the work that he's done. And we know now that everything about mitochondria has to do with circadian biology. Mitochondria is always repaired, for the most part, by melatonin. And you should never take supplemental melatonin because your body's designed to make it in a cyclical fashion whenever you divorce your body from exposure to light. How else do you make more melatonin? AM sunlight interacts with a amino acid in your eye called tryptophan. And tryptophan is a benzene ring that traps photonic light and activates it so that you can synthesize melatonin. You see, that's why you have to get the morning sunlight to be able to guide your hormonal cycle into the evening, and you have to live in darkness to be able to have those proper melatonin levels to be able to recycle bad mitochondria.
Yeah, and I think we're living these artificial lives, under artificial light. My husband gets pissed off because I've changed out all the bulbs in the back of the house. Just the back. That's my compromise. Like in the front of the house, we have a ton of windows, so I usually keep the lights out. But in the back of the house, I have special light bulbs so that if someone does have to get up to go to the bathroom in the night, I try not to turn the lights on. But if he does, then it's mitigating a little bit of that, artificial light in the middle of the night. I've tried to explain this to him. I'm like, you don't want to turn lights on in the middle of the night because then you're telling your brain it's the middle of the day and it's going to stop. You're going to have sleep issues. But so many people will wake up in the middle of the night and go straight to their phone,
Exactly.
and scroll or try to listen to something to fall back asleep. And it's like you're messing with your brain at that point. Like you're giving your body a different signal, and that's going to lead to all kinds of other problems.
Right. Like we were talking about cortisol and
Yep.
melatonin, they're actually antagonistic hormones, meaning
Ah,
they antagonize each other and they operate on an axis, meaning it's like a seesaw. Anytime one is elevated, the other one is being suppressed, right?
mm-hmm.
So you need to know that because whenever you get light into your eyes, more specifically blue light, you're suppressing melatonin, meaning you're elevating cortisol. What is cortisol synonymous with? Stress.
Right.
What else is cortisol synonymous with?
Weight
Inflammation,
gain. Yeah. Inflammation.
weight
Yeah.
gain. Yeah, exactly. That's why blue light is actually making you fat. And it sounds impossible to believe, but the hormonal pathways in your body are commanded by the light environment. There's another way that our hormones and our circadian cycle gets programmed. The timing in your brain pays attention to when you eat, right?
Yes.
So because when you eat, you're calling you're calling cortisol to be able to break down proteins. That's what it does effectively. So whenever you're eating a meal, you're elevating cortisol to be able to do that. And when you break down proteins, you elevate your blood glucose. And blue light alone elevates your blood glucose and cortisol regardless of what you eat or when you eat it. So what does that tell us about all the diseases that a modern man actually faces, or a modern woman? We're facing inflammatory disease, right?
Yes. Yep.
We know that. Systemic inflammation. And that's easy to understand that all disease begins with inflammation. But what is inflammation essentially? We know that we can pay attention to the acidity of our bodies, and we can manage the fact that anything that's more acidic is more inflammatory. Alkaline is more basic, it's a reduction in inflammatory processes, right? Everyone in your community knows that because from what I've seen from your posts, your followers all actually have like a graduate level understanding in nutrition, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that if you talk to any average person or even an educated person about nutrition, they don't really understand all the facets, and they'll try and tell you that well, if you want to improve your diet, then you need to eat like
Fruits and
you know
vegetables.
yeah, exactly. And I know that you guys know that that's actually the farthest thing from the truth that could
Yeah.
possibly be, because you know about the lies that have been told by the American pharmaceutical industry, you know about the lies of the American agriculture industry,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that they've created all these manufactured drugs and manufactured foods, and those have led us in the complete opposite direction that evolution is trying to lead us to. But what us as quantum clinicians are trying to teach you is that the manufactured light that you're using on a chronic excessive basis is doing the exact same thing unbeknownst to you. And you have to learn about that. And, I want to make another point whenever I try and describe the facets of quantum biology and quantum wellness. What is a quantum clinician really? It's a clinician, it's a doctor or coach that understands all of the facets of environmental medicine, right? Of environmental wellness. And I think it's really important right now, considering how different our environments are than the way that our ancestors evolved in. And there are more chapters to that story that if you want to learn the truth and the whole story, you need to make sure that the person that you're paying attention to or that you're hiring is willing to tell you every different part. And if they're not willing to acknowledge all the parts of the story, then you may be putting yourself at risk because you're not getting the whole picture. What am I trying to get at more specifically? You need to learn about all the electromagnetic frequencies, not just visible light, because there's a ton of benefits that we can get from ultraviolet light, from red light using photobiomodulation. And, even blue light itself isn't bad from the sun because it's in a fully balanced spectrum with all the different wavelengths that the sun provides. And whenever you're looking at a screen, the difference is it's a monochromatistic, I should say, form of light that doesn't include all of the other beneficial wavelengths.
Right.
Totally different way of doing things, right?
Yes.
Because each wavelength of light activates different hormonal pathways and different metabolic processes in your body. What are some other parts of light that you can't even see with your own eyes? There are things called EMF, and I don't know how much your followers know about EMF, but it's just a short for electromagnetic frequencies, meaning your Wi-Fi, your cell phone, Bluetooth, the radio waves that are in the air, and the frequencies emitted from cell towers. All of those wavelengths are actually forms of light, meaning they're within the electromagnetic spectrum, but they're actually beyond the visible spectrum. So our eyes are incapable of seeing these frequencies, but that doesn't mean that they're not having a biologic effect.
Right.
And we know that definitively because of the extensive work that was done by Dr. Andrew Marino. I don't know if you're familiar with the name, but he is a biophysicist that spent his entire life researching the biologic effects of EMF on the human body or on all biological systems. So, just to make a quick summary, what did all of his research? Yeah, you need to read the book Going Somewhere.
Okay.
The Truth About a Life in Science.
Okay.
And he spent his entire career studying with Dr. Robert O. Becker, which is a really famous guy that originally discovered the bioelectrical mechanisms and was able to explain and prove how they work in animal systems, and in all of biology actually operates on a DC electric current, meaning we are all bioelectrical. So they realized through their studies that all of the man-made electro frequencies had a major effect too. And this guy Marino is actually one of the most published scientists of all time. And most people don't know that he and Dr. O'Becker actually went forth to try and show their evidence to Congress, and they were shut down, and O'Becker's lab was actually destroyed, and so he could never practice any research again. But Marino himself even went as far as to become a lawyer on top of his educational background to try and prove in the court of law that this is something that we need to pay attention to as a society, because the original research that he did was using mice, and with those mice they exposed them to electromagnetic fields that were as simplistic as that of an electric power line. We're talking about back in the 1970s. And they were able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that EMF puts all cells into a stress state. What is stress synonymous with? Cortisol. What is cortisol synonymous with? Inflammation,
Inflammation. Yeah.
right? So we know that all disease begins with inflammation. So when we know that all cells get put into a state of inflammation and stress just by being exposed to electromagnetic frequencies as simplistic as a power line, then we know that that's something that we have to pay attention to in biology, and we don't have the choice to ignore it. And just because it's a more difficult thing to mitigate, I don't think in any way, shape, or form is it safe to ignore it and just to say that it's okay that I give my kid an iPad to be able to use, on Wi-Fi all night, or to say,
Mm-mm.
to some of my clients, I don't have a problem with you putting AirPod antennas in your head right next to your brain where all the mitochondrial density is in your body, and knowing that mitochondria are an analog for electromagnetic frequencies in your environment, that's okay, because it's not okay. And if you're ignoring that, I think that you're actually going to end up worse than you were from the get if you don't pay attention to EMF. Was another thing that Marino's research actually proved beyond a shadow of a doubt. The mice in those studies became infertile.
Mm.
And this was reproducible time and time again. And he wanted to get that information out there, but all of his career, the research that he would try to publish was always suppressed by the NIH, the National Institute of Health, right? You come to realize that all of these industries were funded by the major electrical companies that were rolling all these electrical lines back and forth across the continental United States. It's sort of the same story that we know of with big agriculture and, with big pharma.
Right.
We know that they're funded by the same industries that are producing the very products that they're supposed to be able to, analyze whether there's a biologic effect or if there's a risk from what they're producing. We're in that same situation with EMFs. And the reason why that's important for the discussion today is because EMF, electromagnetic frequencies, is light. It's just
Mm.
beyond the visible spectrum of light.
Well, my
And just
daughter
because,
says she can see it, which is crazy. She has non-speaking autism, and she tells me that she sees different rays of light off of different vibrations, off of different frequencies, and different lights that people emit, different lights. And so I definitely believe that it's very real, you know.
I think that that's something that you definitely need to pay attention to a lot sooner than not, because you know what that says. That means that she may be someone that's more electro hypersensitive, and that's
Yeah.
a condition that most of us have absolutely no frame of reference for, because EMF tends to be like a silent effector. But there are people out there that have a ton of problems because of the EMF that they're being exposed to, and they don't realize that that's exactly what their problem is.
Mm,
And that's why I'm saying that EMF puts cells in a stress state.
yeah.
EMF elevates cortisol. And you need to find someone that can teach you how to mitigate all of those aspects of light, because it's not just about being out in the sunshine and
Right.
being in ketosis. Because if you don't understand that those other frequencies are damaging your mitochondria too and causing systemic inflammation, then you're putting yourself and your loved ones at risk. And that's why whenever you hire a real quantum clinician, you need to make sure that they understand all of the parts of the picture.
Gotcha. So just to unpack a few things here, because there's like so much that you just explained. One of the worst things that people could do, regardless of the diet that they're on, is eat their food while going on their screen or eat their food in front of the television surrounded by blue light. Am I correct on that?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt, totally. Because blue light by itself actually destroys your circadian mechanism.
Hmm.
What else does blue light do? It, like we were talking about earlier, it elevates your cortisol, elevates your blood glucose. So that means that, if you're trying to stay in ketosis and you're staring there at a screen, if you're trying to eat optimal diet and maintain lower blood insulin levels, lower blood glucose, you're destroying the way that that process actually works just by looking at your screen alone. So that's why
Mm,
I'm actually outside and I'm on the call outside because I'm getting all of the other wavelengths of light. I live in
yeah.
Florida. It's still really strong sunlight here this time of year. I think it's a UV index of 11 today.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, you can imagine how hot and bright it is where I am. So I
Yeah.
don't have to worry about the blue light, right? Because it's the other wavelengths of light that are protecting me from the monochromatistic wavelengths that are coming out of the screens, right? So anytime that you need to be on the phone or looking at the screens, like your computer, or even for people that have to watch TV, if you're not doing it outside during the daytime, you're destroying the way that your brain is designed to operate.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where I feel like a lot of my people are getting really stuck because they're doing the stuff with the diet. A lot of them are just really not able to lose weight. And then I come to find out when I really talk to them about what a 24-hour day looks like for them. They're at work before the sun is up. They're already, by the time the sun's coming up, they're at a desk on the computer. A lot of them work in tech or in jobs where they have to be inside all day behind a computer screen. And then by the time they get off work, they're not going outside, they're not getting any outdoor time. And then it's dark, and these are my toughest clients to work with. As I do some nutrition coaching with people, and it had been stumping me for the longest time of like, why are they're doing all the nutritional stuff, why are they not able to lose weight? Is it the diet's fault? I guess it's the wrong diet for them. Maybe we should do some diet variation. And now those same women, I have a couple of them right now, have been changing their light environment. I'm like, if you have to be on your computer, you have to be taking breaks to go outside. You
Yeah,
have to find a way to be outside during the sunrise, figure it out. And they're finally starting to lose weight, and they
right,
haven't really changed their diet at all.
right. Yeah, because I hate to say it, but I think blue light is it's the most addictive thing that we have right
Yes.
now for us, because stress itself is an addictive thing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
most people don't really realize that you become addicted to stress, especially when you expose yourself to it on a daily basis, and you become addicted to having higher levels of cortisol,
Yeah.
right? And people don't realize that when they do it every single day, but that's exactly how it becomes a problem that you have difficulty escaping from, right? That's why
Right.
blue light is so enticing,
Right.
because it gives you that dopamine hit. It gives you that sort of feeling the same way that you get whenever you eat a piece of candy or something, right?
Right.
Because you're elevating your blood sugar whenever you look at it.
Right. Yeah, it's so fascinating. I would love to I know we have like a list of things that we're kind of talking about a bunch of other stuff, but I would love to talk a little bit more about dopamine as it relates to sunlight, being outside, getting those natural rhythms. And yeah, how what's the relationship with dopamine in those?
Yeah, dopamine is actually made in the eye from the interaction of UV light with an aromatic amino acid called phenylalanine and with the tyrosine. So those two amino acids, the same way that tryptophan is, are actually built like a benzene ring, which means that whenever they interact with high intensity photonic energy, they become excited and they can lead to the production of those other hormones that we store in our brain. So, what is another thing that we make from UV light interacting with our eye? POMC is a precursor for many of the different hormones that you know of. Like it's called pro-opiomelanocortin, and it's the substance that's needed for your body to synthesize endocannabinoids and also to synthesize all of your endo-opiates like beta endorphin. You see, we
Mm.
have these receptors in our body, in our brains, and the reason that our cells have those receptors is because when we are in an optimal environment, we begin to make boatloads of the hormones that we need to feel excellent, right? You can get high on your own supply if you just get the right amount of sun into your eyes. And that really explains another one of the problems that you said you wanted to bring up was with sunglasses, right?
Yes, that's what I was about to bring up. Yeah.
Yeah, what does sunglasses actually filter out more than anything? They
Light.
block, yeah, not just any UV light,
UV.
right?
Yes.
Which is really one of the most important wavelengths of light that we need and that we're actually lacking. Because when you're inside behind windows or you're in your car with the windows rolled up, you're blocking UV light because that's the way that glass is designed to work in a modern fashion. So you need to be outside to get that, and you need to have your sunglasses off. Otherwise, you're not producing adequate beta endorphin. You're not
Hmm.
producing adequate endocannabinoids. So you can imagine why a lot of us tend to feel pretty anxious or feel stressed out. It's because we're not getting the proper hormones that we're designed to get to be able to feel as relaxed as we should be, right?
Yep.
That's why we may want to have to go reach for something like, CBD, or we might end up getting prescribed opiates from our doctor, and why those things actually help people for a period of time, but they destroy that cycle, the same way that melatonin should never be taken as a supplement. I personally think that you should never take CBD or, definitely not opiates, as a prescription unless you certainly have to for a period of time, meaning like if you had a severe injury that's
Hmm.
really interfering with your well being. So, because what actually happens is you're down regulating your body's own production because our bodies are always paying attention to different sensitive feedback mechanisms that tell you when you should produce appropriate hormones, like beta endorphin, like we're talking
Interesting.
about, or melatonin. If you take melatonin, you're reducing your body's own production.
Hmm.
And not only that, melatonin is made within the cell itself and in the mitochondria.
Yeah.
We don't have any evidence to show that supplemental melatonin actually reaches those levels.
It's crazy with melatonin. I can't tolerate it. I'm lucky because I, had trouble sleeping for most of my life. Now I feel like I'm a pretty good sleeper. But anytime I had ever tried to take melatonin, I would wake up all night. I would have these horrible nightmares. And I've gotten to the point where I can wake myself up from a nightmare. It's weird. I think from just doing a lot of meditation and studying like lucid dreaming, I can actually say, oh, we're having a nightmare. This is stupid. Let's wake up. So anytime, anytime I've tried to take melatonin, I just have these like ridiculous nightmares and I wake up all night. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of lucky in that regard that it's never been like tantalizing thing for me.
Yeah, it's a
But
bad idea. Don't do
yeah, yeah. And I guess speaking of supplements, I wanted to talk a little bit about vitamin D3. Taking it, it's a hormone, obviously, but people take it as a supplement because once I started talking on my platform about how I raised my vitamin D3 without taking a supplement, I got a huge backlash of people saying, well, I take D3 and I'm fine, or what's wrong with taking D3 supplements, or D3 and K2. And I haven't really been able to dive into that with anyone so much. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, actually, vitamin D3 is the same problem in a supplemental form because, unbeknownst to most people, because of the published research that's actually been propagated, um, you know, vitamin D is a hormone within your
Yeah.
body.
It's a
It's a
steroid
very
hormone,
powerful,
right?
it's a very powerful steroid hormone, right?
Yeah.
So it acts only as a vitamin because it's available in food like fish and some other things, but like eggs. But
Egg yolks. Yeah.
realistically, you get a very small amount of vitamin D from your food, and you're actually designed to make a ton of vitamin D from being exposed to ultraviolet light, more
Mm-hmm.
specifically ultraviolet B light. So what actually happens is this high intensity UV light, like I'm in right now, because I'm in Florida in the middle of the day, and I'm usually butt naked anytime I'm outside, but I'm putting this on just to be respectful to your followers here, and I'm on my lunch break, so it's fine. I'm not just using clothes for no good reason. But whenever you're being exposed to UVB, you're turning a conversion of 7-DHC, meaning dihydrocholesterol, into vitamin D3. That's a sulfated process. And that conversion to the active form happens in your kidneys. So
Mm.
first that 7-dehydrocholesterol becomes vitamin D3 in your skin, and then that gets converted to 25 hydroxy vitamin D in your liver, which is the storage form. But the active form makes a conversion in your kidney. So whenever you take supplemental vitamin D, there is no proven relationship between D3 as a supplement form and production in the kidney that has an influence on 125D, which is the active form of vitamin D that programs all of our immune systems and is a powerful steroid that's capable of doing a myriad of things throughout the body. All that information is easily accessible, and we won't waste too much time talking about that. But what happens when you take the supplemented form? You're reducing your body's own production because your body is designed to make that hormone, right? And it sounds counterintuitive, and it sounds like I'm saying something incorrect. But whenever you understand that the supplement industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry that's interested in finding different ways in propagating certain studies that can help fund all of their companies, then that's when you start to realize, like, hey, on a second, wait, why am I going out and buying this thing when I can literally stand outside and make it for free, right?
Yeah.
The way that my body's designed to. And furthermore, taking it, there's no proof that it's actually activating 125D or the
Right. That it's
active form
actually
within the body.
working. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for people that live, above that, the latitude of where they're going to stop getting the UVB really a whole lot. I saw you posted on your page a Sperti vitamin D lamp. Is that something you use? I mean, you're in Florida, or is that something you recommend for people to use?
Me personally, I live at the 30th degree latitude, right?
Right.
So I have the ability to go outside 365 days a year and make vitamin D as long as I'm around solar noon and the sun is above 30 degrees in the horizon, right?
Right.
Meaning from about 10 a.m. to about 4 or 5 p.m. on average. It changes as the different seasons go back and forth. But if you live above, I believe it's the 40th degree latitude, meaning if you're anywhere north of Jackson, Mississippi, then for a period of time during the winter, you're incapable of getting any UVB in your solar yield, right? So what does that mean? That means that the sun in higher latitudes, in higher regions, like if you live up around New York or if you live
Mm-hmm.
anywhere north of Jackson, is not, the sun isn't achieving an an angle that's above 30 degrees in the horizon. So if it's not achieving anything higher than 30 degrees, then UVB is not able to make its way through the atmosphere and reach you at the surface. So it doesn't matter how much time you spend outside. If you live in the northern regions, then you cannot make vitamin D for a period of time throughout the year. And where you live specifically, you'd have to go and find out using the D-Minder app can actually
Mm-hmm.
explain to you, when and where you can make vitamin D based on your personal location, right? So that could sort of explain more than a few things. Um, you know, there's a lot of correspondence right now to, well, before I get into that, you actually were talking about the Sperti D lamp.
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't use it, but for any of the people that I work with in different parts around the world, if they live in an environment where they're living at a northern latitude and they're incapable of making vitamin D for a few months out of the year, like for example, Ohio, which is where
Mm-hmm.
someone that I was talking to this morning lives, I always recommend that they try and get something like that. A UVB lamp can allow them to actually bring that solar yield back to their environment, right? Because they're incapable of getting it. So what they can do is use it during the day outside always, because
Oh, okay.
it's pretty dangerous to use a UV lamp without all of the other protective wavelengths that are
Oh,
available
really?
from the sun, right? Yeah,
Okay.
so that's why you have to have someone that really can tell you how to use these certain lights and how to mitigate your environment, because if not, you could be setting yourself up for harmful failure. And the reason that we know that is because the reason that the paradigm thinks that the sun is a deleterious thing for our health, the reason that the mainstream continues to tell this lie is because of a few studies that were done early on with ultraviolet light
Uh,
whenever they were using UV lamps that didn't provide all of the wavelengths that the sun provides. So UV by itself is potentially harmful,
okay.
could be potentially carcinogenic without the red and infrared wavelengths that have that healing effect, right?
Got it.
And it's something that you definitely need to know and pay attention to before you get something like a Sperti D and start using it.
Yeah, I have one in the bedroom because in Atlanta, it's, technically below that line, I guess. But we get a lot of clouds, a lot of rain, and it gets really dark in the winter. And so that's why I was like, let me just go ahead and proactively buy one. But you're saying, and I also have a EMR tech as well. So you're saying either take that Sperti outside and use it outdoors, like middle of the day, if I'm going to use it during the winter. Um, or could I also use it in conjunction with the EMR tech, like at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, if you choose to use it inside, it does help to be able to use a photobiomodulation device like a red light therapy to be able to help balance the spectrum while you're using it.
Mm,
But there's in no way any device that's going to provide all of the different, wavelengths that are available in the sun.
Yeah.
Like I think a device like what you're talking about, like a red light device, actually it's like a sharpen, 3 wavelengths or so, meaning that usually around 660, 740, 850 nanometers, there are 3 different sharp wavelengths that the light actually provides. Uh, but the sun is, it's all the wavelengths, right?
Yeah.
You have to remember, like, you definitely want to use the light outside during the day. That's my perspective, because
Yeah.
I think that I've had people that didn't follow that advice, and they ended up having some problems, getting some burns that
Yeah.
were really unexpected. So I
Yeah.
think that it could be a huge risk if someone doesn't know how to use these lights properly.
I agree. Yeah. And you can't use them for very long either if you haven't built up your solar callus. You can definitely burn, because I think the timer maxes out at 5 minutes. But when you get the instructions, it tells you don't use it for more than like 2 or 3 minutes at a time or you'll burn.
Yeah, most people don't realize that, you know, UVB by itself isn't necessarily a good thing,
Mm.
or and
Yeah.
neither, because it's such a high intensity form of light that, that's why a lot of the studies that were produced originally led to skin cancer, and we haven't actually gone back to correct any of that bad science that has led us away from the sun.
Yeah.
Like medical doctors and dermatologists are so fond of, right? They're so fond of keeping us out of the sun. I'm
Yes.
actually beginning to think, and realize, and I don't want to sound too controversial, but the more and more time goes forward, and the more that you begin to learn the truth about how biology works in nature, you start to think, whatever the paradigm is trying to say, I
Just
almost want to
do
do the
the
exact
opposite.
opposite of it.
That's where I'm at. That's
Like
exactly
if,
where I'm
if
at now. Yeah.
if they're saying that, the sun is bad, then that's probably exactly what you need to get at. If they're
Right. If
saying
meat
that,
is bad, then eat more meat. Eat more fat,
right.
the right kinds of
But they're
fat.
saying dead, they're staying dead silent about the effects of artificial lights, like and blue light and non-native EMF. That should be something that you need to learn about pretty quickly, because you don't hear anyone trying to warn you about it,
No,
right?
you don't.
Yet they're trying to sell you more of it than anything that you're being, sold, right? Like,
Yeah.
people are actually paying thousands of dollars for all these devices so that they
Yeah.
can be addicted to them and spend their entire workday and evening, and even when they're on the subway, they, or on a
Yeah.
bike ride, they have to keep checking their iWatch and all that stuff. And they're not realizing, like, is this product actually helping my biology, or is it actually, you know, something that's damaging my biology? And when you know all the different facets about how life is designed to work, that's when you start to know, like, hey, maybe I shouldn't buy these different products.
Yeah.
Maybe I can spend my money on something wiser, like a vacation somewhere out to some national parks, or, down to the tropics, where I can get appropriate sunlight exposure, where I can get the UVB that I'm going to need to be able to make enough vitamin D to maintain my immune health, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. We're just programmed to spend all this money on technology constantly, and it's like you want the newest iPhone and you want the nice expensive AirPods and you want to have all these the nicest TV and all these things. It's just like, oh yeah, everyone buys that stuff, but I just spent a bunch of money on deuterium depleted water. Which my husband, he really, I should probably just like make a tinfoil hat for myself at this point, because he's like, you just keep getting more and more bizarre. The more and more that you do, you're just getting more and more bizarre. He's like, you just spent all this money on like water. He's like, and I'm getting the guys from Lightwater on my podcast, which will be cool. But
Oh,
you know,
awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with them, but it's, the more that I learn about this stuff, the less that I want to be in the city, the less that I want to have Wi-Fi in my house, the less that I want. I mean, one of my really best friends that I grew up with, she just bought a bunch of land in South Georgia, and they have no Wi-Fi. She's homesteading, homeschooling, just living off the grid. And I'm like, if you had told me that a couple years ago, I'd have been like, oh, that sounds terrible. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, she's living the dream. That sounds
Right.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to tell you. And like if you don't have someone, you don't have to know all of the complex sciences to be able to know, what's actually affecting you and your environment and how it's working, but you do need to have someone to be able to teach you how to mitigate it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Because it takes a long time to understand the mechanisms, but it's extremely simple to be able to find a solution. Like, how hard is it, to go outside as often as possible
Yeah.
and to go, swim around in cold lakes or cold streams?
Yeah.
Really, it's actually the most fun thing that you could probably do with your free time. And not only that, you're buying yourself more time because anything that's disrupting your biology is stealing time from you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, I feel like there's a lot we didn't get to, but I know my audience will only listen to a certain amount. So I wanted to kind of wrap with asking you on that topic. I know this is what you do, your specialty. A lot of my listeners are probably saying, "Oh my gosh, my whole life is technology based." What do you do? What are some simple things that they can do to start, like you just mentioned, going outside and swimming in cold water in the streams and lakes? What are some other things that you would coach someone to start doing immediately to start mitigating some of these things?
I think the most important thing that people can actually do, even more importantly than fixing their light environment, is to ground their body, right?
Mm,
Meaning that you need to find a place that's not within the electric power grid, and you need to go, like near a natural lake, away from any electricity, or on a decent trail out in a state park somewhere, something like that. Unless you live somewhere that's not in the middle of the city. If you live in the suburbs, you can find some places around. And you
hmm
need to begin to connect your bare skin to the earth's surface in order to gain more electrons into your body, meaning a more negative charge, right?
mm,
Anytime that you have your bare feet, like I do right now, I don't have any shoes on, and I'm connected to the earth as much as possible, because the more of a negative charge you can gain in your body, the less inflammation you'll actually have. Remember, we were
mm.
talking about the pH scale and how
Yeah.
acidity is associated and synonymous with inflammation, right? Well, what most people don't actually realize about that is that, the more acidic anything is, the more of a positive charge it's actually holding, because the pH scale is a proton gradient. So that means that the higher on the pH scale you go, from 7 to 14, where you're going from neutral to alkaline, that's a more negative charge. That means more electrons, right?
Mm,
That's a food story too, because the real point of food is that it all gets broken down fundamentally into protons and electrons. That's
mm,
why a quantum clinician is trying to teach you the more fundamental basics of how biology works. And I know that it all sounds complicated at first, but it's not, because of the fact that all of these things are easily mitigated and none of these practices are expensive, right?
yeah.
You can do all of these things for free. You just have to understand how to pay attention to all of the different facets, right? And so why do you get more electrons when you touch your bare feet on the ground or whenever you go swimming in the streams and lakes? Because of anytime that anything that has more electrons comes in contact with something that has lesser electrons, the larger, more electron dense object begins to allow electron flow into the lesser electron dense body. We know that because of the work of Robert Applewhite, 2004. He actually proved this effect. So whenever you're getting barefoot on the ground, you're absorbing free electrons from the earth, right? That means that you're providing your mitochondria with more electrons that it needs to make energy in your whole entire body, right? That means that you're creating a more negative charge in your body. You're increasing the negative charge. That means that you're dramatically reducing inflammation in every cell from top to bottom. See, the system is always designed to be grounded. And throughout evolution, we've gone through different seasons and different environmental cycles where light can actually become stronger and actually become weaker, like, really harsh winters and even, ice ages where our ancestors were faced with long periods of time without strong sunlight. You start to think, well, how did they survive if this was such an important factor? Yeah, well, they were grounded to the ground 100% of the time. So grounding is much more fundamental than actually light itself.
Wow.
And I know that you said that, it can be discouraging for some of your followers because they're so addicted to the food story.
Yes.
And they really think they can control the food and their diet a lot better, a lot easier, because it's something that is very easy to dictate. Like whatever I put in here, and like, oh, I need to find out what's in my environment that I need to pay attention to, even if I can't see it or whatever. Like a wireless technology.
Yeah.
But I always tell my people, you need to just think about one thing at a time, each day.
Yes.
Don't try and focus on everything at once, because if it doesn't matter how fast you're going forward, as long as you're moving, you're doing laps around the person that's sitting on the couch, right?
Yeah.
So you have to do a little bit each day and don't overwhelm yourself. If you can come to me, I can teach you how to fix your environment in 21 days. I have a program. You can visit my website at optimallight.net, or you can email me, info@optimallight.net.
Awesome. I'll make sure I put that in the show notes so everyone can get a hold of you and also follow you on social media. I know you did a live stream last week, and so hopefully you'll do some more of those. I enjoyed it immensely. And thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. This has been awesome.
Oh, absolutely. Pleasure to be here. First, I want to